Yep, and then those connections can kind of get a little loose. If you fly through a thunderstorm, you're likely to rip the airplane apart because I hear things that I've never heard before. All right, here we go. David H is first up. Have you ever experienced an earthquake while heading down the runway? Are there protocols for this situation? This is a picture of a 70s disaster airplane movie with George Kennedy, the cigar smoking maintenance guy that's in every one of the movies. And there's an earthquake, like Earthquake 77, and the airplane's rolling down the runway. To answer your question, no. No, I haven't. And are there protocols for this situation? No, there aren't. I'm not sure you'd know that you were having an earthquake because the airplane is shaking so much anyway on the takeoff roll. I'm not sure you differentiate between that and the ground shaking unless you saw the runway coming apart, in which case you'd want to get that airplane in the air as fast as possible. So that was what would go through my mind. But I might be the next star of the Airport 77 genre type of movie with an earthquake or a tsunami. Even better. All right, good question. All right, Stephen Brubaker is next. When you fly as a passenger, how much attention do you pay to what the pilots are doing? Taxi, takeoff, route, landing, and do you judge how they perform? Oh my word. I'm the biggest Judgy McJudge pants there is in the back of the airplane. I hate being a passenger, right? If you're the type of person that likes to drive the car, you hate being a passenger. Why? Because you're a backseat driver. I'm absolutely a back airplane driver. I'm judging the pilots all the time. Why'd they do that? Why didn't they do this? Why don't they make a PA? I'm absolutely the worst at that. And again, my wife hates traveling with me in the back of the airplane because I hear things that I've never heard before. And then I have to say to her, is that noise? Do you normally hear that noise back here? Because I don't know what that is. And she just, it's not a good thing. All right. At Frobard. All right. This is a UFO sighting video he's referring to. Please explain how he could see something that's not an airplane on the TCAS. I thought TCAS checked the transponders of other aircraft. Does it use radar and or cameras too? It does check out the transponders of other aircraft. It doesn't use radar, but it will identify what's called a primary target. So a primary target is an airplane that's not squawking a code. It doesn't have a transponder turned on or even installed. It just sees there's a hunk of metal and it's somewhere in the air, and it will give you that. It'll just show up on your screen. Sometimes there's not an altitude associated with it because it's not transmitting that information. Just somewhere like right out there, there's an airplane. You got to start looking high and low for it. That's called a primary return. It doesn't use cameras at all, but that's it. When you see a UFO or a UAP, they call them these days, many times that's basically an airplane that's not squawking, or it's a weather balloon or something like that that doesn't have a transponder associated. It's most likely not a UAP, but you never know. It could be. All right. Next is at Taters and Gravy 99. What percentage of commercial airline pilots do you think come out of the military? Back in the day, back in the early 90s when I got hired, it was about 80%. So about 80% of the hiring at America Delta United, the larger airlines, were military. It was about 20% civilian. That's flip-flopped now. I think it's around 25% military, maybe 30%. And 70% civilian pilots that either come up through the regional carriers in a flow-through program, or they just straight out get their hours on a civilian through the civilian route and not in the military. Why is that? Well, the military is downsized quite a bit from the late 80s, early 90s. Remember, Ronald Reagan was president. The Cold War was on. We were going to double the size of the military. Back then, we didn't have drones. So drones take an inordinate part of the flying burden now these days. And there's fewer and fewer actual pilots in the cockpit, and they're requiring you to stay on longer after you earn your wings. So in my case, I had to stay on for 5 years after I earned my wings. I think now it's 10 to 12. And so now you might as well stay and make a career out of it. So there's fewer and fewer pilots that are available to go to the commercial airliners straight from the military, about 20 to 25% these days. unlike back in the day when I got hired. Good question. All right. Emery Yurtas, do your fellow passengers recognize you from YouTube? Yes, is the answer to that. And it's interesting when we were like at 100,000 subs. Every once in a while, I'd go out in public and somebody would go, "Are you, you know?" And they were wondering in their mind, "Are you that guy that owes me $10, or are you Captain Steve?" All right. And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm Captain Steve." "Oh, that's where I know you from." Now that we're over 1 million subs on YouTube, that's a regular occurrence. In fact, I have to budget a little bit extra time, especially when I go through an airport. I was just in Cincinnati a couple of days ago. I was speaking at an event up there, and I came back, and I had about 3 hours in the airport before my flight took off, and I probably talked to 15 different people that recognized me as Captain Steve. So again, you know, we get around 500,000 views a day on this channel. That's about the same size as CNN in the evening on any one of their programs. So a lot of eyeballs recognize me, but people have that same reaction. They look at you like, "Are you?" No, I'm not the guy that owes you $10. I'm Captain Steve. And yeah, I do get recognized quite a bit. All right, next is from Dawn. "Hi, Captain Steve. So you say that commercial pilots have to stay at least 25 miles away from storms." Yes, that's correct. "And that storms can damage planes. What about the military weather checking planes that fly straight into hurricanes?" So that's a little different operation. They're not required to stay 25 miles away. However, flying into a hurricane, you still want to avoid the thunderstorms. So there are embedded thunderstorms inside a hurricane. Most of a hurricane is a lot of turbulence, a lot of high winds, but you can see on your radar where the embedded thunderstorms are. If you fly through a thunderstorm, you're likely to rip the airplane apart. So even the hurricane chasers don't fly into those thunderstorms, but they've got an active radar on all the time, avoiding those thunderstorms that are embedded, even though they're flying into a 150 mile an hour wind. Sometimes when I fly through the jet stream, it's 150 knots or more. I've been through a jet stream that was over 200 knots. It was kind of turbulent as well. That would be the equivalent of flying into a hurricane, but avoiding the thunderstorms. All right. That's a very insightful question. All right. At Billaport 8255, when you fly into a foreign country and are flying out in short order, an hour or two, do you need to clear customs or are you exempt? It depends. Sometimes if you do a turnaround, like you go down to St. Martin or you go down to Aruba or you go down to some place where I think St. Martin it depends on whether it's the American or I think there's a British one. But at any rate, if you stay on the airplane, typically speaking, you don't have to go through customs. If you come off the airplane and you want to go into duty free and it's on the other side of customs, yep, you do. You just show them your passport. They know that you're with the crew. They'll let you go do what you're going to do, but you got to check back in with customs. It's more of a pain in the neck than anything else. You better really want to go to duty free. Otherwise, you just stay on the airplane. When I go over to Europe, I go to South America, I get off, I'm going to the hotel. I do always go through customs. I have to check out with customs. When I come back, I have to check in with customs to get back to my flight the next day. At Aston Martin 427, can pilots listen to music while flying? Or if so, do you have a favorite flying song? The answer is no. You're not allowed to. Do some guys do it? Yep. It's not permitted. You're not allowed to have personal electronic devices on in the cockpit. I have flown with some captains in the past they'll remain nameless at this point, that brought a Bluetooth speaker and listened to their country western songs. And, you got to speak up and say, "Hey, Captain, I don't think that's okay." And if he says, "Well, lump it," then you got to lump it. There's a thing called professional standards where you can call and say, "Hey, this captain had his personal electronic device out and he was listening to music on Bluetooth." And those are the people that will call and fight that fight for you. But there is a way to address it, I suppose. But the answer is no music is allowed. All right. At Ryan DeFranco, 7740, why do the cabin flights flicker during turbulence? Well, it's like anything else. As the airplane is bouncing up and down, those lights are connected. They're plugged into something, and those connections can kind of get a little loose after a while. Remember, that airplane goes back and forth every day, day after day. So sometimes the lights will flicker a little bit. Generally speaking, it's not any sort of insidious thing like all the power is going to go out on the airplane. It's just that the airplane's bouncing up and down. And it might appear that all the lights are flickering when only really one or a couple of them are flickering. But I understand that could be concerning to you. All right. At JT Bibberdorf, Do you know when air marshals are on the aircraft, and do you know any of them? I do know when the air marshals are on the airplane, they have to check in with the captain before the flight. Do I know any of them? Nah, I mean, I'm chummy with some of them over the years, but I wouldn't say I'd recognize them in public and that we're on a first name basis. I just know when they're there. All right. And they have to check in. All right. Kenneth Ray, next. Years ago, I worked on risk management with a consultant whose background was in aviation. He described the New York City area as a nightmare when the wind direction shifted, coordinating Newark, LaGuardia, and JFK, and even Teterboro to circle around to the opposite direction. Does it take a long time? And there are many moving parts. Did you experience this and describe it from your perspective as a pilot? Great content. Keep it up. Yes, you're absolutely right about that. It is a quasi nightmare when front comes through, and the winds will be from one direction. Once that front moves through, the winds shift dramatically from the other direction. They have to turn all the airports around. The worst is when they turn one airport around and not the other. And Newark, I've always said this over the years, Newark is kind of like the redheaded stepchild. No offense to redheaded stepchildren, but you understand what I'm saying. They're kind of the third wheel in New York behind LaGuardia and JFK, and so they play second or third fiddle to those other two airports. Teterboro is another one that gets thrown into the mix as well, because there's airplanes coming in and out of there all the time as well. So turning an airport around is a task in and of itself. Turning 3 or 4 airports around all at the same time, you can expect delays, you can expect holding, you might even have to divert someplace else, refuel, and come back and try it again. It takes quite a while to turn all the airports around. All right, these are the questions for today. You had some excellent questions. I hope I gave some adequate answers here. Send in your questions to the comments. We scour them all the time. You might be on the next episode of Ask the Captain.